In the quiet town of Mbale, Uganda, the sun rose softly on what was supposed to be the best day of Amara's life. Her hands were still stained with fresh mendi, her heart full of dreams, and her home alive with the sound of wedding songs and laughter. Dressed in her bridal gown, surrounded by love, Amara believed she was walking into her forever. Her aunt was tying her jewelry, her mother fixing her veil, and outside, neighbours were dancing and cheering. But far across town, something unthinkable was happening. In a decorated church filled with guests, Amara's groom, Kwame, stood at the altar, but not waiting for her. He stood proudly next to another woman, dressed in white, smiling, calm, like this had always been the plan. The guests were confused, whispering, cameras flashed. No one knew how to react. While Amara's family prepared to leave for the ceremony, singing joyfully and celebrating her future, they had no idea they were heading straight into betrayal. Amara, the bride full of dreams, didn't know that her groom was a man full of secrets, and those secrets were about to destroy everything. Amara's family danced joyfully through the streets of Mbale, singing traditional songs and clapping as they made their way to the church. The sun was bright, the drums were loud, and the whole neighbourhood followed behind, celebrating the bride. Amara sat quietly in the wedding car, her heart beating fast, her hands folded over her henna-stained palms. She smiled shyly at the thought of seeing Kwame, her groom, the man she thought would love her forever. Her mother leaned over and whispered, "Today is your day, my daughter," and Amara nodded, holding back tears of joy. But as they neared the church, something started to feel strange. The air didn't feel right. The music seemed to fade. People standing near the church gate weren't smiling. They weren't clapping or cheering. Instead, they stared, some whispering, some recording with their phones, others just looking shocked. Amara's father was the first to step inside the church. He expected a happy crowd, a waiting groom, and a proud ceremony. But what he saw stopped him in his tracks. The altar, it was already occupied. Kwame was there, yes, but he wasn't alone. He was standing beside another woman, a woman in a white wedding dress, a woman holding flowers, a woman with a veil, just like Amara's. The church was silent for a moment, and then it burst into gasps, whispers, and confusion. Amara's father shouted, "What is this? Where is the real bride? This is our wedding." Her aunt, standing just behind him, put her hand over her mouth and fainted onto the floor. The other guests began to move around, unsure what to do, unsure what to say. The priest looked completely lost. But Kwame? He didn't move. He didn't panic. He didn't even look surprised. He just stood there, calmly, as if everything was going according to plan. Amara was still outside, helped out of the car by her cousins, her long dress trailing behind her. She was smiling, nervous and excited. But when she stepped through the church doors, her smile dropped. Her eyes went wide. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. In front of her, the man she was supposed to marry, the man who had promised her love, who had looked into her eyes and talked about building a life together, was holding hands with someone else. Another bride, another wedding, another life, and none of it included Amara. The flowers she was holding slipped from her hands. Her knees felt weak. But even in that moment of shock, she stood still. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stared, frozen, trying to understand what was happening. People in the church began turning to her. Phones came out. Cameras started recording. A buzz went through the crowd. "That's the real bride," someone whispered. "What's going on?" another said. Children were crying. Elderly women covered their faces in shock. Amara's little cousin ran up to her, pulling her hand, saying, "Come, let's go. It's a mistake. Let's go." But it wasn't a mistake. It was something deeper, something darker. And in that moment, the truth began to surface. Kwame wasn't just cheating. This wasn't just a double-booked wedding. This was betrayal of the worst kind, planned, prepared, and hidden from everyone. As her family rushed around her in panic, trying to make sense of it all, Kwame finally looked at Amara. Their eyes met, and still he showed no guilt, no fear, no shame, just a small, strange smile, like he had won something. like this was what he wanted all along. His other bride, still holding his hand, looked nervous but didn't let go. She glanced at Amara once, then quickly looked away. The silence in the church grew heavier. Even the priest stepped back, unsure whether to continue or stop the madness happening in front of him. Amara's mother began crying loudly. Her father was shouting at the top of his lungs. Cousins, uncles, family friends, everyone was moving, talking, yelling, asking how this could happen. But Kwame stood still, not saying a word. It was like he had no heart, no feelings, nothing, just cold, calm. Amara stood in the doorway in her white dress, looking like a queen without a kingdom, a bride without a groom. The cameras pointed at her now. Some people whispered, "She's so strong," while others just watched in silence. But inside, Amara's heart was breaking, not just because she had lost her groom, but because she had lost her trust, her belief in love, her fairy tale. It had all been a lie. And the worst part? Everyone was seeing it happen live. But even in that moment, Amara did something no one expected. She took a deep breath. She stood tall. She didn't run out. She didn't scream or throw things. She just looked at Kwame, straight in the eye, and then turned away. Her voice didn't shake. Her hands didn't tremble. And that's when people realized this wasn't the end of her story. It was only the beginning. Just hours before the wedding, Amara sat quietly in her bridal room, dressed in red and gold, waiting for the car to arrive and take her to the church. The air was filled with the smell of flowers and perfume, and from outside, she could hear her family singing and laughing. But something strange happened. Her cousin, Layla, came in and smiled too sweetly. She said, "Just rest a bit more. I'll lock the door so no one disturbs you." Amara nodded, not thinking much of it. But minutes turned into an hour. She tried to open the door. Locked. She called out, but no one answered. Her phone had been taken earlier by Layla, who said it needed charging. Slowly, Amara realized she wasn't just being kept inside. She was being trapped. Outside, no one knew she was locked in. They thought she had already left for the church. But the truth was painful and shocking. Her own cousin had betrayed her. Layla had taken money from Kwame to keep Amara locked up. A bribe, a price for silence, all for a wedding that wasn't real. Kwame had planned everything, from locking Amara in to walking down the aisle with another woman. That woman wasn't a surprise guest or a mistake. She was his secret lover, a girl from Ginger. And worse, she was pregnant with his child. That's why he rushed the wedding. He didn't want the truth to come out too late. He wanted to make the second bride his wife before anyone found out. But what Kwame didn't know was that someone had already started to put the pieces together. Amara's younger brother, Joel, just 17, had seen things he wasn't supposed to. He had noticed Kwame sneaking out at night, seen strange messages on a borrowed phone, and once overheard a phone call about a second ceremony. Joel had been suspicious for weeks, but no one took him seriously. So, on the day of the wedding, when he saw that Amara wasn't coming out of her room, he knew something was wrong. While the others were panicking at the church, Joel ran home. He broke open the door to the bridal room and found Amara crying, sitting alone in her wedding dress. Joel didn't waste time. He helped Amara stand, wiped her tears, and handed her a phone. He had already saved all the proof. Screenshots, voice notes, even photos of Kwame with the other woman. And without saying a word to anyone, he took Amara straight to the police station. On the way there, Amara stayed silent. Her heart was racing, but her mind was clear. She wasn't going to cry anymore. She wasn't going to beg for answers. She wanted justice. She wanted to face him, not as a broken bride, but as a woman who wouldn't let lies win. At the police station, Joel showed the officers everything. The messages between Kwame and Layla, the secret calls to Ginger, the payments sent through mobile money, the pregnancy test Kwame had tried to hide. The police were shocked, but they acted fast. 2 officers were sent to the church immediately, and Amara, still dressed like a bride, asked to go with them. She didn't want to wait. She wanted to look him in the eye. She wanted to show him that she knew everything, and she wasn't afraid anymore. Back at the church, the fake wedding was already halfway through. The second bride looked nervous, holding onto Kwame's arm tightly. But Kwame looked proud, like he had gotten away with everything. The priest was about to ask them to exchange rings. That's when the doors slammed open, and in walked Amara, not as a broken woman, but as a storm, her dress glowing, her face strong, her eyes filled with fire. 2 police officers followed behind her. The church gasped. The second bride stepped back in fear, and for the first time that day, Kwame looked scared. Amara walked straight down the aisle, not blinking, not shaking. She stopped right in front of him. He opened his mouth to speak, but she raised her hand. She turned to the priest and said, "This wedding is a crime, and I have proof." Then she handed everything over to the police, the messages, the money transfers, even the photos of the second bride's pregnancy test. The whole church fell silent. Some guests left, others filmed. The second bride started crying, and Kwame, he tried to run, but he didn't get far. Outside the church, people were already gathering. Joel had shared the news online. Videos were going viral. Cameras were waiting. The moment Kwame stepped out, police grabbed him and handcuffed him. Amara stood at the church door, watching it all, not one tear on her face. People looked at her with respect, with shock, with pride. And all she said was, "This is what betrayal looks like, but I'm not the victim, not today." Just as Kwame lifted his hand to place the ring on the finger of his secret bride, the large wooden doors of the church burst open with a loud bang. The sound echoed through the building, freezing everyone in their places. Heads turned, mouths dropped, and a wave of confusion swept across the crowd. Standing in the doorway was Amara, not broken, not crying, but burning with strength. Her wedding dress still shining, her veil still pinned to her hair, and her eyes locked directly on Kwame. Behind her stood 2 police officers in full uniform, serious and ready. For a moment, the church was completely silent. Even the priest stood frozen, holding the ring in one hand and the Bible in the other. And then he dropped the Bible in shock. Gasps filled the room. Cameras clicked. Phones were raised. People didn't know whether to sit, run, or watch. Amara walked forward slowly but firmly, her heels hitting the floor like drums of justice. Her face showed no fear, only fire. As she approached the altar, Kwame's face turned pale. The confidence he had just moments before started to disappear. His hand, still raised to put on the ring, slowly lowered. His secret bride looked around, panicked, stepping slightly behind him. Amara didn't stop. She walked right up to the altar and stood only inches from them. The police followed closely behind, ready to act. "Continue," she said in a calm voice that cut through the room like a blade. "Put the ring on. Let everyone see the man you really are." Her voice was calm but cold, and the entire room felt it. Kwame didn't say a word. He looked around for support, from his groomsmen, from the priest, from the guests, but no one moved. No one stood with him. Everyone was watching Amara now. And then, as if something snapped, Kwame turned to run. He pushed past the second bride, grabbed the edge of his long robe, and ran down the aisle. His groomsmen followed, stumbling over chairs and flower petals. One even tripped and fell near the choir stand. The ceremony turned into chaos. Guests stood up, trying to move out of the way. Someone screamed. Children cried. The second bride shouted Kwame's name but didn't follow. She stood frozen, tears rolling down her face, lipstick smudged. She looked down at the ring that was never given. Amara didn't move. She stood like a statue, watching it all fall apart around her. The 2 police officers chased after Kwame. The church doors slammed again as they rushed outside. The guests were now in a storm of confusion. Some still filming, some shouting, some just staring in silence. The priest slowly bent down and picked up the Bible, unsure if the wedding was over or if he had just witnessed something out of a movie. Outside, Kwame didn't get far. A small crowd had gathered after Joel, Amara's younger brother, had posted the news online. The video had already started spreading. People were waiting. Some were even live streaming. And when Kwame tried to escape through a side path, the police caught him. He struggled, shouted, even tried to blame Amara, but no one listened. The officers handcuffed him, and the cameras caught every second of it. Inside the church, Amara finally turned to face the guests. She wasn't crying, not even shaking. She stood tall, her hands clasped in front of her dress, her voice clear and strong. "I came here to get married," she said, "but not to a liar, not to a thief, not to a coward who hides behind women and secrets." The guests watched in awe. Many nodded. Some clapped softly. Others were just stunned by her courage. She walked over to the front pew, picked up a small folder, and handed it to the police officer who had returned inside. "These are the documents," she said. "Proof of the lies, the money, the betrayal." Inside were screenshots, voice messages, bank transfers, and even a copy of a medical form proving the second bride's pregnancy. It was all there. Everything Kwame had hidden. And then Amara did something no one expected. She looked at the second bride, the girl from Ginger, now sitting alone on the altar steps, mascara running down her cheeks. "You were part of this," Amara said gently. "But you are not the only one who was fooled." The girl looked up, ashamed, and nodded slowly. She said nothing. She had no more words left. Amara stepped back down the aisle, walking slowly, gracefully, the same aisle she had dreamed of walking with joy. She now walked with power. No groom beside her, no husband waiting. But still she walked like a queen. As she reached the door, someone called out, "You're brave." Another said, "You're an inspiration." She paused for a second, turned slightly, and said just loud enough for all to hear, "This is what standing up looks like. In my wedding dress, I didn't get married, but I got my truth." And then, with her head high, she walked out into the sunlight. Outside the church gate, the air was heavy with tension. People had rushed out, phones raised, voices whispering, and some just stood still, trying to make sense of what had happened. Kwame was running, but not fast enough. 2 police officers caught him before he could escape down the narrow road behind the church. They grabbed his arms, pulled them behind his back, and put him in handcuffs. His white shirt was wrinkled, his forehead covered in sweat, and his face full of panic. The once proud groom was now a criminal in front of everyone. Dozens of phones recorded the moment. Some people shouted at him, others just filmed in silence. His name was now being spoken not with joy, but with disgust. And then calmly, like she had all the power in the world, Amara stepped outside, still in her bridal dress, still standing tall, and not a single tear on her face. She walked past the shocked guests, past the crying second bride, and straight toward the police. In her hand was a small folder, nothing fancy, just plain papers, but it held everything. She opened it and gave it to the lead officer. "Here," she said, her voice clear. "These are the documents. These are the lies." Inside the folder were printed screenshots of love messages between Kwame and the other woman. There were voice notes where he called Amara just a backup. There were bank slips showing money he had taken from Amara's dowry and transferred to someone else. There were even handwritten love letters he had once given to Amara, full of promises, now just part of the evidence. It wasn't just a betrayal of love. It was fraud. It was theft. It was a well-planned trap, and Amara had caught him in it. The officer nodded and began to read through the papers. More people gathered. Journalists who had come to cover the wedding were now filming a scandal. One woman shouted, "Record this!" Another whispered, "Is this real?" A young man was already going live on Facebook saying, "You won't believe what's happening in Mbale." In less than an hour, the video of Kwame being arrested had spread like fire. TikTok clips were posted by the minute. Facebook shares kept rising. Hashtags like #Justice for Amara and #Mbale wedding drama began trending. But the most powerful moment was still coming. One of the journalists approached Amara and held out a phone. "Do you want to say something?" she asked. Amara looked at the camera. Her hands weren't shaking. Her voice didn't crack. Her eyes didn't look away. She simply said, "This is what betrayal gets. When you play with a woman's heart, when you lie, when you steal, the truth will find you." She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just stood there, strong and silent after her words. And that video, it hit 2 million views in just 3 days. Comments flooded in. People from all over Uganda, even from other countries, started talking about it. Some called her a hero. Others said she gave them courage. Many women wrote, "I wish I was that strong." But Amara didn't post anything else. She didn't argue. She didn't explain. She had already said what needed to be said. Her silence after that made her even more powerful. She walked away from the church, still in her wedding gown, with her head held high. Her family walked beside her. Joel, her younger brother, stayed close. He had helped her unlock the truth, and now the world was watching. Kwame, on the other hand, was taken to the station. He tried to lie again, but it was too late. The evidence was too strong. The public already knew. His business partners cut ties with him. His family didn't defend him. Even the second bride, once full of hope, said in a broken voice, "He lied to me too." He was left with nothing but shame, and everyone knew his face. People in Mbale talked about Amara for weeks. Some even visited her house just to say, "We're proud of you." Little girls pointed at her in the market and whispered, "That's the brave bride." Shopkeepers gave her free goods. Women stopped her on the street to hug her. But Amara didn't let it all go to her head. She stayed calm. She smiled, but she didn't celebrate. Because deep down, she knew this wasn't just about her. It was about every woman who had ever been lied to, used, or silenced. And she had spoken for them all. The video kept spreading. Celebrities shared it. News channels picked it up. Even talk shows discussed the story of the bride who stopped her own wedding to expose a liar. But Amara, she returned home quietly, changed out of her wedding dress, and sat with her family. They ate together, not in sadness, but in peace. They didn't lose a groom. They lost a cheat, and that was a blessing. What happened that day wasn't just about drama. It was about truth, and the way Amara stood in it, proud, fearless, and dressed like a queen, reminded everyone watching that strength doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just walks straight into fire and doesn't burn. Months after that dramatic wedding day, Amara's story was still being talked about in every corner of Mbale. But instead of hiding or feeling ashamed, she rose higher than anyone expected. She didn't let the pain destroy her. Instead, she turned it into power. Amara started an organization called Bride, Not a Victim, and it quickly became a safe space for young women. Girls who were unsure about their relationships or afraid to speak up now had someone to guide them. Amara helped them check background, ask the right questions, and trust their own voice before saying yes to a proposal. She was no longer just a bride in a white dress. She had become a voice, a leader. Schools invited her to speak. Churches asked her to share her story. Women's forums wanted to hear her advice. And every time she stood in front of a crowd, she didn't cry or talk like a victim. She stood with her head high and her voice steady. People listened. People clapped. Some even cried. And when someone asked her, "How did you stay strong?" she always gave the same answer. "Because I walked out of betrayal, wearing my wedding dress like armor." That one line touched hearts. It reminded everyone that strength can come from the deepest pain, and that no woman has to walk through it alone.